So you're thinking about moving to the Isle of Man, or maybe you've already made the decision. Congratulations. But now you probably have a ton of questions about the place. How do I get here? How much does it cost to live here? What supermarkets do you have? What about Wi-Fi speeds, healthcare, or getting around? I'm going to try and answer some of your questions in this video, which is meant to be a bit of an FAQ for anyone thinking about moving here or anyone who's already made that decision and is in the planning phase. Any questions that I missed, stick them in the comments and I will try to answer them for you and use them in future videos. So grab yourself a big cup of tea, sit down and take some time out, because this is going to be a longer one as I try and answer your most frequent questions when it comes to moving to the Isle of Man. When it comes to traveling to and from the Isle of Man, you only have two choices. You can either go by sea or by air. If you're traveling by sea, then you will have to inevitably use that building here behind me. That's the sea terminal in Douglas, and all passenger sailings to and from the Isle of Man arrive and depart from here. The primary travel ports are Heysham in Lancashire and Liverpool. There are also occasional sailings to Dublin and to Belfast. Sometimes they also travel to other destinations, which they announce on their website. We generally have two schedules. We have a summer and a winter schedule. During the summer, you can take a fast craft from here to Liverpool, which takes about 2.5 hours. And on a nice day, it's just like a very comfortable bus ride. During the winter, you have to make do with the slower Ben Macri, which is the ferry that also brings all the freight over. That one goes to Heysham and back, and it takes about 3.5 to 4 hours depending on the weather. Prices entirely depend on when you travel. If you're off season, like now in January, it can be extremely cheap. If you travel during TT or high season, May, June and onwards, it can be very expensive. Your best bet is to check the Steam Packet website, domain here, for up-to-date prices, special offers and so on. We only have one ferry company, the Steam Packet, which has been around for way over 100 years. It's sort of the island's lifeline. It used to be privately owned, now it's government owned, and that doesn't mean it's necessarily cheaper, but it gives it a little bit more stability. You can travel on foot or you can take your car. If you take the fast ferry, it can only take relatively small cars and vans. Anything bigger, like trucks, buses, and big cargo stuff, has to go on the Ben Macri. That one is actually being replaced next year or the year after, so if you are watching this video in 2023 or 2024, there's a good chance the new boat, the Manxman, will already be in service. Until then, you have to make do with the Ben Macri, which by the way means Lady of My Heart and Manx, which has been the lifeline boat and the one that brings over all the freight for over 20 years. She's slow, she's a bit aged, but she will get you there. The Ben also has a pet lounge if you want to bring your cat or your dog over, and it also has pet cabins. It also has regular passenger cabins, but there aren't that many, so if you want to book one of them, you need to be relatively quick or do it well in advance. I believe the new ferry will have a lot more cabins, so maybe that's not that much of an issue in the coming years. A word of warning, the Isle of Man is situated in the middle of the Irish Sea, and that means weather is always a factor around here. Especially in the winter, sailings can be affected by the weather. They can either be cancelled or they can take a lot longer. If they're cancelled, there's not really much you can do. If the ferry is cancelled, then usually the planes are cancelled too. So there are occasions where you are stuck here and you can't come or go. If the sailing does take place, then it can get quite rough out there. But I can tell you, having worked for the Steam Packet 20 years ago, I used to work on the Seacat Isle of Man, the Lady of Man and the Ben Macri, that they would not go out if it's not safe to do so. Their safety record is really, really good. It's a very reliable, very well-run company. However, it may not necessarily be really comfortable to bounce around the Irish Sea for 4 hours on a boat that's not really built for this kind of weather. If you are stuck on a rough sailing, all I can basically tell you from years of working on the boats is stay hydrated, stay in the middle of the ship in as low down a deck as possible. Think of it as an inverted pendulum, so you want to be low down, and yeah, just hold on. So traveling to the Isle of Man by sea is pretty easy. You can book your tickets online or you can book by phone. It's reasonably reliable. Most sailings take place when they say they take place, except in the winter you may get some delays. And in the summer, especially during TT, it gets really, really busy. But other than that, this is probably the most reliable and most used way to get to and from the island. If you're traveling by air, you're going to arrive and depart from that place here behind me. It's called Ronaldsway Airport. It's our only commercial airport. There's a couple of other airfields, but if you're a normal passenger just wanting to get here and get back, this is where you will arrive. It's a very small rural airport, only one terminal, about 20 minutes from Douglas, 30 minutes from any other place on the Isle of Man. It's sometimes called Heathrow-on-Sea for all the money it had spent on it over the years with little to show for it, but it does its job as a small rural airport that will get you here and get you back. The Isle of Man has what's called an open skies policy, which means the government doesn't really get involved with flight operators. It doesn't subsidize flights or, make sure there are certain flights on all the time. This means the flights and its operators can change. At the moment, the biggest operator here is probably EasyJet. They have flights to Manchester and London on a regular basis, almost every day, or pretty much every day. There are other airlines as well, and your best bet to check which one is flying right now, because I don't know what time or what date or year you're going to watch this video, is to go to the Isle of Man Airport website and check the destination schedule, the destinations and the schedules on there. When you arrive here, you can either have someone pick you up with an airport taxi, like the one there behind me, or you can grab a bus into Douglas for about £3. A taxi into Douglas from here is, I think, 25 quid. There's a fixed price for it usually. And yeah, a bus is about 3 quid or thereabouts. So it's pretty cheap. Also, ever since Corona struck, the airport has been run on a sort of reduced mode. Not that there's much to shop or eat anyway. It's a small departure lounge. You can have a coffee there. You can buy some overpriced perfume, and that's about it. But, don't really expect the sort of Gatwick experience here. It's a small airport. It does its job, and it's reasonably modern, and, it will get you here and get you back. If flying commercial, like the one taking off here behind me, isn't really for you, then we also have a private jet terminal. For those of you with a bit more money in the bank. And there's a new company that opened recently, and they seem to be doing well. They are called Fly Private. I'll put the URL in the bottom. I'm not getting paid by them, but what they do is they have a small propeller plane, a very modern airplane, with I think 4 seats, and they offer flights, charter flights from here to UK, further afield and back. And if you share the cost between a few people, it's actually not too expensive. Finally, if you like helicopters, we also have a helicopter company over here. I'll put the URL in the bottom, so if you want to have a tour of the island or something like that. So flying is definitely the most convenient and the fastest way to get to the island and back, but it can be disrupted by the weather. As you can tell, the airport is right by the sea, and the sea today is actually relatively rough. So when you come in and you fly here for the first time, don't be surprised if you can see along the runway out of your side window, because it's strong crosswinds here all the time. That's pretty normal. Also, if there is fog, you may get flight cancellation, so always keep an eye on the weather when you fly to or from the Isle of Man. The next topic is shopping, and let's start with groceries. The biggest supermarket on the Isle of Man is probably the Tesco Superstore here behind me in Douglas. Also the only Tesco on the Isle of Man. There are no other superstores or Tesco Express. If you feel a little more posh, then there's a Marks & Spencer in the middle of Douglas. They also have a food hall. And the only other big supermarket chain that you will find over here is called ShopRite. They are locally owned and therefore place a special emphasis on local products and produce. As they can be quite good, I'd thoroughly recommend you check out ShopRite if you want to see what the Isle of Man has to offer. ShopRite has small and big stores in Douglas, Onchan, Port Erin, Ramsey, and a couple of other locations. Next to that, we also have a number of co-ops, and there's also a whole bunch of Spar convenience stores and the usual privately owned convenience and corner shops as you would expect. Big stores like the Tesco here behind me close at 11 p.m. Some of the smaller stores may close earlier. Also on Sundays we close a little bit earlier, and don't expect any 24/7 stores here. So if you'll go out looking for a Tesco Express at 4 a.m, you're not going to find one. If it's really urgent, I think there's a 24/7 McDonald's drive-thru, and next to that there's a petrol station that also has a small 24/7 store. But that's about all you'll be able to find in terms of nighttime grocery shopping. Unfortunately, we don't have any of these stores here on the Isle of Man. But having said that, if you like your Sainsbury's, then ShopRite stocks some of their range. And if you like your booze from Aldi, then I believe they actually ship wine to the Isle of Man, or spirits to the Isle of Man, if you order it online. If you're missing the taste of home, then we also have a few stores to help you with that, including a Bulgarian food store, a Filipino shop, a brand new Asian supermarket, and there's also Robinson's, a family-owned business on the outskirts of Douglas, where they run a huge store that stocks all sorts of foods from all over the world. Last but not least, if you like your booze and you also like pretty good sales service, then there's no way past this place here in Douglas, the wine cellar. Once you've filled your fridge, there are probably also a lot of other things you may want to buy. Now, as there's a lot to cover, I'm going to pretty much rush through this, but you can always skip back and forth in the video or pause it to read the names on the screen. Also, I do apologize if the video is a little bit Douglas-centric, but most shops, especially the bigger ones, happen to be in or around the island's capital. When it comes to any other shopping, then the biggest high street is here in Douglas, where among others you will find all of these shops. But unfortunately, you won't be finding any of these. There are no standalone designer stores like LV or Gucci on the Isle of Man. Instead, we have one branch of flannels where you can exchange bags of money for loads of shiny things. Also, the Isle of Man isn't exactly big on malls. The only ones that we have that you could call so are the Strand Centre here in Douglas, Tower House here behind me, and Tinwald Mills, which is a bit outside of Douglas, and where you can also find a lot of high-end brands in the clothing and also the homeware department. Next to that, we also have a Pets at Home, a B&Q and a Curry's PC World. When it comes to shopping electronics, it's sometimes tempting to just think about the big UK store, but it's definitely worth checking out the smaller local stores, such as Walton's or Colburn's here behind me, as they will very often match the likes of Curry's on price and provide you with a much better pre- and after-sales service. Especially if something goes wrong and you have to ship it back, you're better off with a small local store. And shopping local means the money stays on the island and doesn't go to some big UK or international chain. That brings me to the next category, online shopping. Most online retailers such as Amazon or eBay will ship here without problems, but you will sometimes come across sellers that are unwilling to ship here or that are asking for exorbitant fees to do so. That's mainly due to some courier companies still wrongly classing the Isle of Man as offshore and simply charging much higher fees. Unfortunately, there usually isn't very much you can do about it. You can ask the retailer or the seller to send it via a different courier or via Royal Mail, which is the same price as within the UK. But other than that, there's not much you can do and you just have to shop somewhere else. If you do like your Amazon, then it's worth typing in your Isle of Man postcode before ordering something to make sure they can actually deliver here. The last category I want to cover here for now is furniture. And there we have a number of really good local options for you to check out. They cover everything from low to high-end furniture, fittings and anything else you need to make a home. Also, if you don't mind your furniture being second-hand and you want to support a worthy charity in the process, then a visit to the Hospice Warehouse at the outskirts of Douglas is always a good idea. Unfortunately, we don't really have an IKEA here. Sometimes people do what's called IKEA runs, so if they have space in a van, they may advertise it on Facebook. So have a look for some of the local buy-sell Facebook groups for more. Let's take a quick look at the different ways to get around the island. The Isle of Man is famous for being a mecca for petrol heads, and it therefore comes as absolutely no surprise that people here love their cars. We have almost as many cars as we have inhabitants, and using your own car is the most convenient way to get around. I will definitely do a separate video on driving at some point. I know I said this before, but I will, because there's so much to cover. But let's just have a quick look at the basics. If you are the holder of a UK or EU or EEA driving license, then you can drive here without problems. If you become a resident here, then you can also, in fact you must, exchange it for an Isle of Man driving license. You can get the forms for that at the post office, and it's all cheap, easy and pretty quick. The Manx license looks pretty much like the EU license and also has the same classes of driving licenses, but there are some differences compared to EU ones. A number of driving licenses from other countries can also be exchanged without having to go through any kind of test or exam again. And it's best if you check the government website for this, or you can contact the driving license department by using this email or phone number. Driving licenses generally are processed by the Isle of Man Post Office, so you can find the forms you need to fill in either on their website or in any post office on the island. The Isle of Man driving license allows you to drive on the Isle of Man and in the UK, but, and this is quite important and very few people seem to know this, it does not allow you to drive in Europe. So if you are planning to drive in mainland Europe on your holiday or something, then please get an international driving license, which I think costs you about £11, and you can also get it from the post office here. Also, unlike in the EU, where an international driving license is valid for 3 years, ours here is only valid for 1 year. Bringing your car over is also relatively easy. If you are bringing a car over, say from the UK, and the car is not older than 3 years, then it's just a bit of paperwork and you get your plates and off you go. Again, you can get those forms from the post office. If your car is older than 3 years at the time of registration on the Isle of Man, then it has to go through what we call the Manx test. Because we don't have any annual MOT or TÜV over here, Basically, they put it through one test to show that it's roadworthy, and then they just let you go, and it's never tested again. Of course, you're still obliged to keep it roadworthy, and if the police catches you driving a banger that's unsafe, then they will stop and fine you. But we don't really have the kind of MOTs that you are used to from the UK. The Manx test is done at the test center on the outskirts of Douglas, and you need to book your car in. You need to do this pretty much as soon as you arrive on the island, or as soon as it's practical, I think is the law. And as they're usually quite busy, I recommend booking in early, because there can be quite a bit of wait of a month or two until you get a slot. Also, the Manx test can be quite strict, so make sure your car is in tip-top condition, because they will fail you for small things. The logic behind this is, as this is likely the first and only test this car will get on the Isle of Man, they want to make sure it's safe and sound before they let you loose. If you have any further questions about bringing a car over here, or the Manx test, or what's required, then you can contact the test center using this phone number and email address. If you are only visiting the Isle of Man, then you're allowed to remain on your foreign number plates for a period of up to 12 months. But if you become a resident here, you really do need to register it as soon as it's practical. And the police do look out for this kind of thing, because we do get a lot of people driving on UK plates for longer than they should. This is a small island, the cops pretty much know all the cars, and if you drive on UK plates, you do stand out, because all Isle of Man plates have the letters MN or MAN in them. So if you drive around with a car that doesn't have that in the number plates, then we know you're not from here. We also have our own car tax scheme over here, and it's a bit of a mixture between CO2 emissions and the age of the vehicle and the engine size. Now, I'm making this video in January 2022, so if you watch this later in the year or in 2023 onwards, then there's a very good chance we will already have switched to a weight-based system. But at the moment, we still have the old system. And for example, if you drive an old car, like my other car is an old 2007 Merc with a 3-liter engine, it's actually very expensive. It will cost you over 400 quid, because it is taxed on the engine size. However, if you drive a more modern car that's taxed on CO2 emissions, it can be quite cheap. Also, we have a special category for classic cars over here, because people love their old cars here. And if you drive a car that has been manufactured before May 1990, then it qualifies as a classic, and you will pay £25 tax. We also have a category for electric cars. They are currently taxed at £6 per year. As with everything, these costs are bound to go up, but at the moment, at the time that I'm making this video, that's how much you pay. If you have any questions about this, then you can contact the relevant department by using this email address or phone number. You obviously also need insurance to drive here, and you'll be very pleased to know that the Isle of Man has some of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, insurance rates for cars or vehicles in general in the whole of Britain. That's because we're a small island and there isn't very much in terms of organized car theft. Now, you do get the odd theft, but it's usually some drunk who just wants to get home, and you get the car back the next day with an empty tank and probably a couple of dents. When it comes to buying car insurance, I would recommend you try local companies such as Kestrel Insurance. They have a website, and they also have a shop here in Douglas. Or you can try the likes of Ross Gower, who I'm using and who specialize in sort of Channel Island Crown dependency insurance. And both of them will get you quite cheap quotes, and you'll be very pleasantly surprised how cheap it is to insure a car over here. Fuel prices are pretty much on par with the UK. It used to be that we were always a little bit more expensive, but I noticed that recently we've actually been slightly cheaper. So unfortunately, that means it's still quite expensive to buy fuel here. If you use the UK fuel prices, well, it's the same pain here. Also, if you drive an electric vehicle, you'll be pleased to know that we have a very good network of public chargers now. The Isle of Man only uses the Pod Point network, so please download the Pod Point app. There are no other chargers or public chargers here, such as Ionity or any of the other ones you find in the UK or Europe. But Pod Point works pretty well. The government here and the MUA, the electricity people, they are putting in more and more. So if you have the Pod Point app, you'll be absolutely fine with your EV. Of course, electric cars are generally absolutely perfect for driving on the Isle of Man. And they are so perfect that I made a video about them, which you can watch here. And yes, it is true that we do not have a national speed limit on the Isle of Man. Now, we still have speed limits. If I'm driving here in town, I have to drive 30 or 20, depending where I am. Many roads out of town also have speed limits posted, and if you see them, please stick to them. A, for road safety, and B, because while we don't have static speed cameras here, the police is out and about with laser guns, and if they catch you, you're gonna get a fine. But once you pass this sign at the side of the road, you theoretically can drive as fast as you want. Now, I do say theoretically because you still have to drive in accordance with the conditions. If it's a sunny Sunday morning and you're taking your sports car for a fast run over the mountain and the road is free and dry and everything's wonderful, nothing is really stopping you from going into three figures and having some fun. But if you do the same thing on a rainy Monday afternoon rush hour and you endanger other drivers while you do it, then do expect to get into serious trouble for it. We have a very good and very reasonable roads policing unit over here. They do police in line with the sort of motoring mentality that the Isle of Man has, which is very different to the UK. But they will pull you and they will fine you and they will bring you to court if you drive like an idiot. So yes, while you do have more motoring freedom here than you have in the UK, please use this freedom responsibly. Next to using your own car, you can of course also use public transport to get around the Isle of Man. And we have a very good network of bus connections covering most parts of the island. You can find all the schedule and routes and other information at this link. There are various types of bus tickets. Many of them are designed more for tourists, but if you are planning to commute by bus, then I recommend you invest in a go-kart. You can buy these online or at the Welcome Centre at the Isle of Man Sea Terminal in Douglas. And there are different types of go-karts depending on how long your trip is every day. For example, I use a purple one because my commute is very short and the way it works is very similar to an Oyster card or any kind of other travel card. So you load a number of trips on it and it makes it cheaper than paying in the bus at the time. For example, my trip along the promenade every morning when I commute by bus cost me 90 pence if I use the go-kart as compared to I think £1.10 or £1.20 if I pay in the bus. While it is a little bit like our Oyster card, it does have some flaws. One important thing to keep in mind with the go-kart when you buy one is that yes, you can charge it up online, but any trips that you buy online are not immediately credited onto the card. It can take a few hours or even up to a day for trips to appear. So if, like me, you sometimes want to load some trips onto the card in the morning and then hop on the bus 5 minutes later, it's likely not going to work. Ask me how I found out. I have no idea why that's the case, it's just the way it is. If you are in town and you load trips onto your go-karts at the Welcome Centre, at the Sea Terminal, then those trips are available straight away. So that's your other way to do it. Of course, you can always also buy a ticket on the bus itself. If you live in the north of the island, basically somewhere up in the sticks, past Ramsey, Derby, Andreas, that kind of area, then you can make use of an app called Man Go, which is also run by Isle of Man Transport or by Bus Vannen as it's called. This is designed for anyone living in rural areas. It's sort of a call a bus scheme. I have to admit I've never used it myself, but apparently if you have this Man Go up, you can order a minibus from your phone, or at least you can ask any minibuses in the area to stop by and get you where you need to go. Everywhere else on the island you can just wait at a bus stop, and usually there's one every 15-20 minutes depending where you are. The bus fleet here is quite modern. They've spent a lot of taxpayer money on a lot of shiny Mercedes buses. You also have a lot of double-decker buses here, and they're usually on time, so public transport is actually a really good way to get around the island. Next to buses, we also have a number of trains, but to be totally honest, most of these trains are more aimed at tourists rather than commuters. And because I am filming this video in January, none of these trains actually run right now. But if you're here during the summer, then you will see steam trains, you will see the electric railway, you will even see a horse tram, which is going to run at some point in the future along Douglas Promenade again. Theoretically, you can commute by steam train or by electric railway or even by horse tram. Practically, it's probably easier if you use a bus or a car. If you are looking to use ride-hailing apps such as Uber or Bolt, Grab, FreeNow or any of the others, then you'll be disappointed because we don't have any of them here. We also do not have the electric bike or scooter apps like Voi or Lime. The only thing we do have are good old taxis. There's plenty of them around, and what company is available depends on where you live. Here in Douglas, for example, you have A1 taxis, you have telecabs, you have elegans, and they're usually there within a couple of minutes when you call them. Finally, the Isle of Man government is quite keen to push what they call the active travel strategy. This means they want people to walk or cycle to work rather than use cars or public transport. As a result, you will see more and more cycle paths spring up all over the island, especially when they redo roads. They usually now put a cycle path in it as well, which of course is great if you like to cycle. A lot of employers here also encourage it, and it is a great place to cycle because the air is relatively clean There's relatively little traffic compared to real cities, and of course it's the healthy thing to do, and with very short distances it's not difficult. The only thing I would recommend is that you make sure you have the right gear, because obviously this being an island in the Irish Sea, it can get windy here, it can get wet here, and it can get quite cold here. But other than that, this is a great place to cycle to work. The next topic I want to quickly cover is healthcare. Primary healthcare is free in the Isle of Man, just as it is under the NHS in the UK. When you first arrive here, you will have to register with a GP, and we have 14 GP practices on the Isle of Man. Now, just as in the UK, GP practices over here are pretty busy. You should still be able to get a GP, but you may not be able to see him or her immediately. A lot of the consultations these days, and ever since Corona, are being done over the phone, but generally you can still see a doctor here, and the situation is pretty good. So if you do need to see a doctor, you will get medical help. Thanks to Corona, we have also recently been added to the UK NHS app. That wasn't the case before, so you can now use that here, and you can also use the NHS UK Corona app, the Corona Pass. And we also have a patient online portal here that once you have a doctor, they can sign you up for, and then you can access your medical records online. And I think you can also book appointments. To register for a GP, you need to fill out a form that you can find on the government website. Unfortunately, they don't have any kind of short link I could put here. But if you go on Google and you just type in Isle of Man GP practice registration or new registration, you'll find it straight away. Outside of normal GP practice hours, we have what is called METS, or the Manx Emergency Doctor Service. They cover weekends and overnights, and they are meant for non-life-threatening conditions that cannot wait until you can see your own doctor. I'm going to put the METS number in the bottom here, so take a note of that just in case you ever need it in future. For emergencies, the number is 999, just like in the UK, and we have a very good ambulance service over here who usually are with you within minutes. Of course, if you live somewhere rural, it can take a little longer, but I would say that compared to the UK, our ambulance service here is certainly of a better quality. Next to that, we also have our own hospital. In fact, we technically have two. We have the main hospital in Douglas called Nobles Hospital. That's relatively new. That was built about 20 years ago, I think. And we have the Ramsey District Cottage Hospital, which at the moment, as I'm doing this video, January 2022, is serving as the sort of A&E for minor injuries on the whole island. So if you have anything minor, they basically send you there. Anything more serious, they will send you to Douglas. The two facilities between them can cover most procedures that may be necessary. However, it can be that for any more complex procedures and treatments, such as intensive cancer treatment and other things that aren't covered here, you may be sent to the UK. We have a thing called the Patient Transfer Service. So if you do require treatment in the UK, then there is a system in place that they fly you over, they fly you back, and they basically look after you. But because of the limited size and the limited resources we have on the island, not all procedures can be done here. While I would say that our NHS and our health service here is significantly better than the one you will find in the UK, it does suffer from the same sort of problems that you have over there or in some other countries. Namely, it's underfunded, it's understaffed, and there are waiting lists, and there are quite substantial waiting lists in some cases. That's why a lot of people go private for certain procedures if you can afford it. If you can't afford to go private, then unfortunately you will have to wait. I know this is not the fault of the staff in the facilities. I know they are, working very hard. This is more of a political issue. But yes, there are waiting lists. Also, if you are wanting to register for an NHS dentist, that is almost impossible, I would say. I think you can be put on the list or on the waiting list, but to be quite honest, you are way better off going private. There are a lot of really good dentists over here. If you pop on Facebook, there's some Facebook groups where you can ask questions about the Isle of Man, and just ask for a few recommendations there, and they will point you to a good private dentist who can take care of whatever you need. When it comes to dentistry, we do have everything here from the basics to cosmetic dentistry to even very complex stuff. There's one surgery up in Douglas who can carry out even the most complex of surgeries. So you won't have any problems there. If you do want to try and get on an NHS dentist's patient list, or at least on the waiting list, then please do email this address and they will advise you further. If you do travel to the UK and you need medical treatment while you're a resident in the Isle of Man, then you are still covered under the NHS. We have a reciprocal agreement. And that also goes vice versa. If you do visit the Isle of Man as a UK resident or citizen, then you are covered here. It's worth noting here that this agreement is only valid for 3 months. So if you are a resident in the Isle of Man, you go to the UK for more than 3 months and you need hospital treatment, for example, there was a case in the news recently where this happened, then you may end up with a bill. So keep in mind that this agreement is only valid for a stay of up to 3 months. Also, if you are opting for private healthcare, then do check with your provider what facilities they have on the Isle of Man or what facilities they pay for here. I do know that some of them, I'm not going to name any names, but some of them don't have much here or don't have any accredited facilities over here. So it'd be pretty useless to sign up with them. But generally you do find proper healthcare, private healthcare policies if you live in the Isle of Man. You just have to do a bit of research, speak to the salespeople, and pick the one that offers the most on-island facilities or procedures that are covered, so it saves you having to travel to the UK every time. Where COVID and Corona are concerned, and I'm recording this again in January 2022, so this may have changed when you watch it, but where Corona is concerned at the moment, we're pretty much in line with the UK. We did have some different policies and procedures in the past because we kind of regulated access to the Isle of Man or to the islands differently than the UK did it. But right now we are more or less in line with the UK. It almost feels like there is no Corona here. People wear masks in shops and things, but other than that, it is what I would call relatively relaxed. We have recently dropped PCR tests, I believe, pretty much completely, even for international arrivals. What you have to do at the moment, and again, please check at the time when you watch this video, is you only have to do an LFT test when you arrive here, and the government encourages residents to do 2 or 3 LFT tests a week just to see if you have Corona or not. LFT tests can be picked up from any pharmacy for free. There's plenty available. Also, where vaccinations are concerned, the whole island is pretty much vaccinated. Vaccines are freely available if you want them. The first one, the second one. And at the moment we are on the first booster over here. God knows how many boosters there will be if you watch this in a couple of years' time. But yeah, right now we are well covered with vaccinations. Most of the island is vaccinated, which is why it's probably so relaxed here. There are cases in the community, there are loads of cases in the community, but it's this Omicron variant and it seems at the moment it's pretty much under control. So as far as Corona is concerned, we kind of follow the UK, but we also do our own thing where we deem it necessary to protect the island. So, you know, if you watch this video some point in the future, just check on gov.im. There's a little section right at the top where it says COVID-19. Check what the current restrictions are, what the current rules are, and especially what the current travel rules are when it comes to getting here or leaving here, because of course that may change over time. We also have the Department of Health and Social Care, and recently that was restructured or redesigned. It's now called Manx Care, and it covers, as the name suggests, all the social care aspects. It covers some of the care homes, disease prevention, and basically the main health care provision that you need on an island like this. I would say that compared to the UK, we are probably better off here as far as general healthcare is concerned and the services that you can and do receive from government. But we are far from perfect, and there are waiting lists here, and there are issues here, and underfunding and staffing issues, and you know, all the kind of things you would find in the UK. I don't think it's as extreme here as it is in some parts there, but you will feel it. For example, you know, when you want to see a dentist, or I know that mental health, for example, is underfunded or short-staffed. So it's not perfect, but I think it's for your day-to-day needs, it's pretty good. And of course, there's always the option to go private if you can afford it. If you do go private, then yeah, you won't have any problems because you'll be seen straight away, and you know, whatever ailment you have will be attended to quite quickly, which of course isn't, you know, that good compared to the fact there are people on waiting lists who just can't afford private. But unfortunately, that's the way it is here. And unless this is changed on a political level, and that means offering more money for doctors and nurses and, you know, other much needed staff to come here, I don't think it's going to change. But in general, healthcare here is pretty good, and it's free, and you will be able to see a doctor, so don't worry. Let's have a quick look at TV stations, radio stations, mobile phones, internet, and that kind of thing. Let's start with TV. Although we're not part of the UK technically, you can receive the BBC here and all channels that you would receive over there on the other island behind me. no problems at all. Unfortunately, that also means the BBC will send you a letter every year asking for money. So yes, you have to pay a license fee over here. It's been a bone of contention for many years because the services here are, obviously we don't get the same kind of value. For example, we don't have a regional BBC program here. We are part of BBC Northwest and that kind of thing. But at the moment, you do have to pay BBC license fee. The license fee, people do come over once in a blue moon. If they do, you usually read about it on Facebook or Twitter pretty quickly. So if you pay it or not is your decision, but technically you have to pay it. Also, you can of course make use of all the online viewers like BBC iPlayer, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, anything that's in the UK. Of course, Netflix also. There were sometimes issues with Isle of Man IPs or IP addresses of residents here and of the local telcos not being seen as UK by the likes of the BBC. This can still happen occasionally when they introduce new IP addresses or change something, but usually it's pretty quickly fixed. So yeah, anything like iPlayer and Netflix UK works here just fine. Where newspapers are concerned, you'll find most UK newspapers on the shelves here every morning, except if the weather is bad and the plane couldn't fly in, then we sometimes don't get newspapers. We do have our own local newspaper company, Isle of Man Newspapers. They publish 3 different papers. There is no daily paper, but they are weekly or every couple of days they come out. There's the Courier, which is the free one that everyone gets once a week. Then there's the Examiner and there's the Independent, and they come out I think Monday and Wednesday or something. It's not worth doing a daily newspaper here because there's simply not enough news happening. It's not that kind of place. But if you do want to keep up with local news, then of course you can check out the local newspaper's website, or you can buy their printed versions in all news agents in town. They're available pretty much everywhere. On the radio front, you will receive all the stations from the UK here as well. So if you like your BBC Radio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, it's all fine, no problems there. We do have 3 stations of our own over here. We have Manx Radio, which is kind of the national broadcaster. It's subsidized by the government to the tune of, 6-figure sums. And it does cover a lot of the things that commercial stations would not cover. It is constantly being criticized no matter what they do. Some call it boring, some call it overpaid, some call it mismanaged. The fact is, it's a national station. It is there to provide programs that stations that need to make money would never provide. For example, you will have Manx language programs on Manx Radio. You will have programs for Manx farmers. You will have community programs. You will have things that are really relevant for the island that may not have many listeners, but that are important in a community sense. So Manx Radio is sort of the national station if you want. The main news is on there, the main talk shows are on there, that kind of thing, so tune into that. They also have an online player and a nice website for loads of news. It's a very good news source. Most people who hang out in offices where there's a radio in the background, they like to listen to Free FM. That's more of a, they also do news, but it's more of a sort of lighter, slightly more modern, slightly more commercial station, very popular. And we also have Energy FM, who also are more of a lighter and more music driven station. All 3 of them are based on the Isle of Man and are broadcasting all the time, except overnight. I think most of them switch to a feed from the UK because, again, it's a small place. It's not worth paying someone to sit there overnight to press a button. Just as a side note, on the radio front, you can actually see the Manx Radio headquarters. It's up there on Douglas Head. In terms of internet, we are pretty well set up at the moment. Manx Telecom, one of the biggest telcos here, has just rolled out or is in the process of rolling out their new broadband network, so you have fiber in most places now. Maybe if you're somewhere in a rural area, not yet, but they are rolling out fiber, so you can get 100 megabit, 200 megabit and more if you need it. I just had fiber put into my house, the 200 megabit line, and it does actually deliver not 200 megabit, but it does get close to it most of the time, so it's pretty good. The 4 main ISPs where you can get your internet from are Manx Telecom, Shore, WiManx, and Blue Wave. Blue Wave is pretty good for anyone who lives out in an area where there's not very good coverage from the other 3, because Blue Wave provides line of sight connections. They have a station up here on Douglas Head, and if you're somewhere in a house around here or within line of sight of one of their base stations, then you can have over-the-air internet, which means if you're on a farm somewhere where there's no fiber yet, then you can still get decent speeds. So if that's an issue for you, check out Blue Wave. Manx Telecom is probably the oldest and most established telecoms firm here. It's not Manx owned anymore, God knows who owns it now, but it kept the name. It used to have a monopoly here, not anymore. Shore came along and that caused the prices to go down, which is great. You will still not quite see the same variety and the same kind of low prices in terms of internet and also in terms of mobiles that you will see in the UK. It's simply not possible on the scale that we have here. There's only 80 odd thousand people, so they can't do the same kind of killer deals they can give you in the UK. But you will get decent priced and decent speed internet on also decent priced and decent speeds and decent spec mobile devices from Manx Telecom and Sure. Those two are the only two that do mobile phone contracts over here, as far as I'm aware. There was talk about a third company, but right now, if you need a phone here, either pay as you go or contract, you either go to Manx Telecom or you go to Sure. Both of them have websites. Both of them also have shops in the town center of Douglas. The shops are like 50 meters apart, so if you don't like one, go over to the other. Both offer you multiple plans and installment payments and whatnot. So if you need the latest iPhone on a super fast 4G connection over here, that's not a problem. On the subject of 4 and 5G, the island is mostly 4G. The coverage is actually pretty decent, but we do not yet have 5G over here, so don't look for that. Also, where phones are concerned, we are part of the +44 UK dialing code. We have our own dialing codes over here for towns. Anything landline is 01624, anything mobile is 07624. And then the number after that. One thing where you do need to be careful when you bring your UK or especially European phone over here is roaming. UK and European operators do consider the Isle of Man a roaming destination, so if you don't want a huge bill, then you need to check that you're covered here. The same goes if you have a phone from here, then each provider has their own roaming packages. Mine, for example, I'm with Manx Telecom, have been for 20 years. If I go to the UK, I have a roaming package, which is loads of data, but technically I am roaming. And also if I go to the EU, I have an included roaming package, which is a few gigabytes, but again, be careful that it's not the same seamless experience you would have if you are living in the EU. So your best bet when you come over here from the UK or anywhere else is to pick up a local SIM card. I think the cheapest pay-as-you-go one is still the one from Sure, costs about £5, comes with 5 gigabytes of data, and that way you make sure you're not on roaming and you don't get caught out by any, charges or anything like that. Let's talk about the weather, and I'm quite lucky today. It's January and it's a really decent day, as you can see. Sun's been out all day. Winters here can be a little bit on the wet, grey and windy side, and when I say a little bit, I mean a lot. Snow is relatively rare. When it does fall, it tends to be up on the mountain, and usually that means the mountain road will then be closed because the Isle of Man has very limited resources when it comes to snow clearing and gritter trucks and that kind of thing. It's just not worth buying it. If snow does fall further down, then it does lead to serious disruption in everyday life. So if you are, from somewhere in Europe where snow is an everyday occurrence in winter, you may find it a bit strange to see schools closing and people not going to work when there's hardly any snow. The truth is people here aren't used to it. Most people drive with summer tires and we just don't have the equipment, we don't have the salt trucks, we don't have the kind of infrastructure to deal with proper big winters. Most of the time, however, winters are, like I said, just wind, rain, more rain, and then a bit more wind and even more rain. Summers, on the other hand, can be absolutely fantastic. We had some great summers recently, proper convertible weather, 30 degrees, sunshine for days and weeks on end. And if the sun shines here in the summer and you drive around, it's an absolutely fantastic place to be. The climate here generally is a little warmer and more moderate than most of the UK, thanks to the Gulf Stream that flows behind the island here. We do have palm trees, but it doesn't mean you should run around in shorts and flip-flops. It's still more of a gloves and hat kind of island. Also, it's pretty much always windy. I'm really lucky right now that it isn't, but generally, yeah, it's always windy, so just be prepared for there always to be wind. It's an island. Very rarely does it get to freezing temperatures over here, but again, with the wind chill factor, if it does go down to 3 or 2 degrees, which it did recently, just last week, then it can feel a lot colder than it actually is. So I do recommend that if you move here, especially if you move here at the beginning of winter, say sort of October, November-ish, that you do get some decent winter clothes and some windbreakers and hats and that kind of thing. But other than that, the climate here is quite okay. It's quite moderate. We have very clean air, and it's a very sort of healthy place to live in that regard. Let's have a quick look at utility providers. If you are used to being able to choose who supplies your electricity or your gas or anything else like you do in the UK or Europe, then you'll be in for some disappointment. We only have one gas provider, Manx Gas, and we only have one electricity provider, and that's the Manx Utilities Authority, or Manx Utilities, I think they're only called now. That's it. They basically both have monopolies. Manx Gas especially is definitely never going to win the prize for most popular company over here. Gas is expensive. Well, gas is expensive generally, but over here it is very expensive. And the arguments between Manx Gas, who run a monopoly, and the government and how much they can and should charge are a constant thing. It's a constant bone of contention. It's a constant talking point for people living here because it's expensive. That's why a lot of people have switched to oil. More and more people have oil boilers and oil tanks in their houses. So when you move here, you will find that your house either has gas or oil. Most houses run on gas, and it's natural gas. And the main thing I can really recommend if you move here to keep your bills low, because there's very little you can do about the gas price. What you can do to keep your gas bills low is make sure that whatever you move in, if you rent or buy, make sure that the boiler you have in there is new. And it's one of the newer, the condenser boilers, the really efficient ones, because it will make a heck of a difference. And you will need the heating in the winter here. Depending where you live, more or less, depending on your house, of course. But trust me, you will need the heating over here, and you will be shocked when you get the bill. Unfortunately, that's one of those things over here. Where electricity is concerned, we have a big power station in Douglas that was built for much money that was loaned without permission many years ago, so we're still paying for that one. Electricity is more expensive than in the UK, you will find. It's not too bad, but it is, probably more than you're used to. I don't think we're quite as bad as the likes of Germany yet, but yeah, it's expensive. However, there are some ways to get your electricity bill down a little bit. One of them is to buy an electric car, because then you get an EV tariff, which gives your whole house, not just your car charging port, half price electricity from midnight till 7 a.m. So that's one way to get your bills down. Just, time your washing machine, dishwasher and the dryer to pop on at midnight then. Also, we have plenty of capacity, so we have the power station in Douglas, we have a backup power station in Peel, and we have an interconnector that goes over to the UK. I think at the moment we're actually exporting some of our capacity because we generate so much. For both Manx Gas and Manx Utilities, you will need to sign up for accounts when you move over here, unless you have a key meter. For electricity, we still have those over here. They're also run by Manx Utilities, and you just have to load money on your key like you do in the UK. Just pop down to the spa. There's loads of shops that have the machines. Last but by no means least, we need to look at housing. So when you move here, you may want to rent a place first. And if you're after a cheap apartment, sort of bottom of the market, 1 bedroom, nothing special, maybe not in the best of shapes, you're looking at somewhere £500-600 a month. If you want anything half decent, meaning maybe a bit of sea view, like along Douglas Promenade here, reasonably modern, with windows that actually really close and heating that properly works, then you're looking at maybe £700 to £1,000 a month to rent. There's quite a few properties there. It can be difficult to get them, especially if you have kids or pets. Unfortunately, that's, like everywhere else, you're going to have additional problems with that. Some landlords don't like it, which is stupid, but there you go. The island is in big demand, so there is a high demand on property to rent and to buy. If you want to rent a house here, there's quite a few available, probably more than there are apartments. But prices for anything decent are starting at, I would say, around £1,000, and then the sky's the limit. If you want like an executive home, there's quite a few of these on the market here. You can rent a detached sort of posh place for £2,000, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 a month, no problem. I think where there's a bit of a supply issue is in the below £1,000 markets. Probably the sector of the market that most of us are looking for if you're looking for somewhere to rent. There are properties, but yeah, be prepared that you're not going to find something maybe immediately, because there is a lot of demand here. There are a lot of people looking. It's a very sort of heating up property market. The same also goes for if you want to buy a house here. Average property prices have gone up drastically over the years, especially very recently. The average house price, from what I've seen in the statistics now, stands at £313,000. That's about 1 or 2 year ago stats, because the statistics always, they look backwards, of course. By now it's probably more than that. We're probably nearer the 330, 350 mark from what I see in the market. House prices have noticeably gone up. Now I'm actually in the market at the moment, so I am looking at properties and at mortgage rates and things. So I have an interest in that. So from what I've seen, yeah, your average house is 300 up. You can still find houses in the 200 to 300 bracket, some decent ones, but be prepared that there's a lot of competition and that you probably have to pay asking price. It's definitely a seller's market at the moment. People can pick and choose. Houses sell really, really fast. There were 2 or 3 for sale in my street. And from the time that the for sale sign went up for the time when the sold sticker came on, we're talking a matter of weeks. So the housing market is hot. I don't think it's going to burst or anything like that. There hasn't been a real housing crash here in a long time, and I can't see one on the horizon. It's probably a bit overpriced and a bit overheated. It's a very good time to be an estate agent. I mean, they're all making tons of cash. What I noticed is, in terms of the prices for houses, in the past, the houses that were in the 200 to 300 bracket used to be the kind of Victorian terraces that you get in town, the big townhouses with 4 or 5 bedrooms, places that are expensive to buy and expensive to run. Now even smaller houses and terraces and almost to up to downs are in the 200 to 300 bracket or even north of that. And that's something that is quite noticeable and that I have not seen before, and that really shows you how expensive properties have gotten here. According to the statistics, the biggest increase in prices has been in the bracket between 250,000 and 500,000, and I've noticed that as well. There are a lot more properties suddenly available in that price bracket, whereby before you were more looking at the 200k mark for a family home. So prices have gone up by 30, 40, 50% in recent times. Part of it is down to the island being seen as a bit of a safe haven, especially in times of COVID. COVID has absolutely skyrocketed prices here. And part of it is also down to the fact that there are no restrictions on buying property here. So that's great if you're moving here and if you're genuinely trying to reside here and you move from anywhere in the world. You can come here, you can buy a house, no problem. There's no special conditions attached to it. Of course, that also brings massive problems because it means that any institutional investors and people who come here just to make profit out of the housing market can also come here and buy up all the housing stock. And that's, from what I've seen and from what I've heard, is pretty much what's happening. And there is an urgent need for the Isle of Man government to take action on this, to either very, very highly tax second or third properties, so institutional investors, or to just put outright restrictions on who can buy houses here, and to make sure that people who genuinely want to have a family home here actually have a chance to do so, because it is getting difficult. If you're looking to buy an apartment or a flat, as we call it, the average price at the moment stands at around 156,000, I think, according to the stats. That pretty much tallies with what you see in the windows at the estate agents in town. If you are in Douglas, head down to Victoria Street, basically find a Starbucks in town, and around that there are most of the estate agents have their offices. So you can look in the windows and compare prices. You can also check some of these names out. These are some of the local estate agents. I'm not getting paid by them. I'm just giving you as a reference, the ones that I know. So have a look at those and see what the prices are for yourself. So yeah, if you're after buying an apartment, you'll be looking at, for something decent, maybe one of the ones at the promenade here. There's always some coming for sale. You're looking at around 150, and I've also seen a lot of apartments now in the 200,000 bracket, which I've not seen really before in the past. So again, an indication prices are going north crazily. There are still the odd apartments for under 100, very rarely, probably fixer-uppers, and in the 100 to 150. So, you can still find those, but there will be like sort of small 1-bedrooms, no sea view, somewhere in the sticks. Also, generally speaking, living in Douglas is most expensive. Properties here are most expensive. Also, if you want to live in Onken, that's that place there. Also very high priced. So the most expensive places to live probably are, Douglas, Onken. Areas like Governor's Hill in Douglas are very, very popular with families. It's sort of the little suburb dream, have your little detached house or semi-detached house. And those are most high priced. If you're willing to live in other parts of the island, especially somewhere out in the sticks, or if you're willing to live in any of the other towns, Peel or Ramsey, for example, you will find cheaper properties. Commute here isn't really much of a problem. Even if you live in Ramsey and you work in Douglas, you commute to something like 20, maximum 30 minutes. That might save you some money, but generally prices here are very high. Mortgages you can get, it's not really a problem. So at the moment I'm working with a independent mortgage broker. Now again, I'm not getting paid by them, but this is the company. They seem to be quite good. They can advise you on what's out there, what mortgage lenders are here. There's 4 or 5 I think you can choose from. There's HSBC, there's probably Lloyds, there's Isle of Man Bank. So getting a mortgage here is not really a problem if you need the money. I don't think you can transfer a mortgage from the UK to here. The financial systems are very, very different. And in fact, maybe I should also mention that I should have made this a separate point probably in terms of finances. Banking and finances here are different to the UK. So even if you come from the UK to here, you will find that it's harder to get a credit card here, even if you have very, very good credit, because the providers here, the financial framework, the laws here are different, so the providers are reluctant to come here. The same goes for mortgages. We have our own basically financial system and regulations here, but there are at least 4 or 5 major lenders here that you can use, so it's not a problem. But be prepared that you have to do everything on Ireland. You cannot transfer a mortgage from the UK. You cannot use a UK mortgage provider. So you really have to look at, like guys like the Blue Square guys, have a chat with them, or Google mortgage provider Isle of Man or something, I don't know. So yeah, it's not a problem to get one here. Prices for mortgages at the moment, like I said, I'm looking at buying property right now. You can get 18, 90, 95% mortgages here. Of course, 95 is going to cost you more. I think the ones we looked at, 95% mortgage would have been something like 3%. If you get an 80% mortgage, it's 1.8 or 1.9 or something like that. So big differences. The bigger your deposit, the cheaper it gets. You can get your usual, I think it's 20, 25, 30 and even longer mortgages. So all those things you can get here. That's not a problem at all. Also a quick word on social housing. As you may or may not know, I'm actually a councillor in Douglas, a little town hall somewhere down there. And Douglas is the biggest landlord on the island because we have a lot of social housing stock. There's other social housing stock being administered by central government and by other authorities. Just like in pretty much any other place in Britain, or in fact probably Europe, social housing is in very high demand. There are waiting lists, so if you come here and for whatever reason you are looking for social housing or for housing to be provided, it's not that easy. It's completely oversubscribed. There is a waiting list. There are new properties being built. Of course, that doesn't go as quickly as people want. And of course, there are restrictions in place when you move from somewhere else to the Isle of Man in terms of what benefits and what services you can instantly access. So just be aware of that. If that's a potential issue for you, it's as complex here as it is anywhere else. A lot of people need social housing, and yes, we should have more of it, but we don't have as much as we wish. So as far as the housing market then is concerned, yes, this is a good place to buy a house. Yes, anyone can buy a house here, which is a problem. We really do need regulations to stop that and to make sure that people who actually want a genuine home here can buy a house and can afford a house, because it is becoming very, very difficult for some people to get onto the property ladder, especially if you're younger. They keep saying it in the news, the under 25s are being priced out of the market, and they absolutely are. I mean, if you're on, the median salary, there's no way you can afford a house if the house suddenly costs over £300,000. So there are issues, but once you are on the property ladder, I think it's a very good place to own property. It's again very stable, it's very safe, values will likely go up. I cannot see a big housing crash anywhere. Of course, I'm not an expert on it, but it has been stable for many, many years. And there's also a bit of a price war at the moment with all our estate agents. If you go down in Victoria Street, you will see that they are trying to compete with each other on low fees. I think one has like a special 0.5% sales fee offer at the moment. So they are obviously trying to make hay while the sun shines. Make of that what you will, but there's plenty of competition between estate agents. And you shouldn't have a problem to find any properties. Finally, one point that was raised politically not too long ago is an increase in what is called gazumping. There are calls for there to be rules brought in for this. So gazumping basically means you look at a house, you like the house, you put in an offer, and the offer is accepted by the seller. So you go and do all your mortgage paperwork, you do all your sums, you calculate what you want to spend and what you can afford, and you're all ready to go. And then suddenly the seller increases the price, and you basically, or he then goes and sells it to someone else for more, and you are left holding the can, and you've spent thousands on fees and lawyers and whatever, and basically you're screwed. That is happening. I'm not sure how much over here, but I'm certainly hearing more and more stories about it. So it's probably something to be a little aware of. And I do know that some, in which case, some politicians, Claire Barber, for example, it was on her manifesto, that they are looking at bringing in regulation to put a stop to it. So yeah, there are probably two pieces of regulations we really need. One is to restrict who can actually buy houses here, or if you own multiple properties, so if you're an institutional investor, that you should be taxed to the hilt, own it, and to make sure that you cannot unduly profit from people just wanting a home. And the other one is that the house buying process is better regulated. Just like anywhere else, you will have your additional costs over here on top of your mortgage. So you need your paperwork, your surveyor, all that kind of thing. If you want to buy here, expect to spend 300k for a decent house. If you're in the top end of the market and you happen to be quite wealthy, it's good news for you. There are plenty of properties here in the 500, 1 million and 1 million up segment. There are some very, very stunning properties around. A lot of rich people, of course, live here. You're not going to find them in Douglas or on the outskirts. A lot of these big mansions, they're hidden away somewhere in the countryside, but they are, of course, for sale in the local estate agents. So if you're rich enough to buy one of those, yeah, you'll be happy here, I think. That's pretty much everything I can tell you on the housing subject. Anything I know of, at least. And that's also pretty much everything I'm gonna cover on this particular video. If you have any other questions, because I know I can't cover everything in one video, this one's already pretty long now, stick them in the comments and I will check the comments and I will try and answer any questions either in the comments or in a future video. So that's the end of this video. I hope it was useful for you, gives you a better idea of what it's like to move here and to live here. It's a good place, it's a stable place, it's a safe place. It's not perfect. It has its flaws like any other place, but there are worse places in the world right now. And if you do move here, I think you will find it to be a very welcoming place, a very friendly place, a island that has a very close-knit community. That can be an amazing thing. That can also play against you. You will find that this can be a great home, especially if you have a family or if you want somewhere to retire. But you will also notice that the prices here are going up just like they do everywhere else, and that the cost of living here is rising. So it's not a cheap place to live. Please do not be under the illusion that this is somewhere cheap and cheerful. Prices are going up here just like they do everywhere else. May this be housing, may this be cost of living, electricity, gas. Since I started doing this video, I've filmed this over a number of weeks. In fact, a couple of months. I just didn't have time. Gas prices have been announced, there have been massive increase. Electricity had a massive increase. Yeah, it's getting very expensive to live here. So please, do your sums first before you move here, and see if you can afford to live here. If you can, it's an amazing place. And if you can't, then yeah, sorry. There's not much I can do. A lot of people are struggling, and I think they will continue to struggle. It's not getting cheaper, it's not getting easier. But let's not be too negative. It's still a nice place, and if you want to move here, then good luck with it. Let me know in the comments, and maybe meet you for a coffee or a beer or something if you're in town. Drop me a line, and good luck with your ventures. So that's it from me for your little Isle of Man guide for now. Bye.